and welcome everyone. It's probably early afternoon for a lot of you out there. It's still 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, but welcome to part 2 of our webinar series, Maximizing Configuration Manager for the Modern World. This session is on managing Windows 10 migrations. My name is Wally Mead, Principal Program Manager at Cireson. Been with Cireson about 3.5 years after spending 22 years at Microsoft, primarily in the SMS and then Configuration Manager product group, so been around for a long time. And I believe with me today we only have Jay. Not that that's a bad thing, but we don't have Phil with us today. So Jay, you want to do a quick intro?
Yes, thank you, Wally. Jay Parek, I'm one of the partners and practice directors at Netrix. We are a full-service technology consulting organization, global, about 350 plus employees. I focus on the end user compute, and that's been my background for the last 20 plus years, helping customers migrate from one desktop operating system to another. Started since Windows 95. So I've been looking forward to discussing Windows 10 and operating system migrations with you today and Wally.
All right, thanks, Jay. And Netrix is one of our valued partners here, so I'm glad to have them co-sponsoring and co-delivering this webinar with us. So if you missed last week's webinar, it was recorded. In fact, that leads me into the next slide on housekeeping stuff. This session is being recorded as well. If you did miss last week's or you're not able to attend next week's, obviously you're here now, unless you're listening to the recording after the fact. We are recording this and it'll be placed up on our Vimeo website, which is vimeo.com/Team Cireson, all one word. It'll probably get up there tomorrow. My guess is it'll be up there tomorrow. And you can go back through the webinar when you've missed, or if you have a colleague that wanted to attend and couldn't, or you wanted to see a demo or whatever, again, you're more than welcome to do that. So we'll get that posted up there. You guys are in listen-only mode, so you're not going to be able to verbally ask any questions, but please do be interactive and ask questions. So as they come up, go to the questions panel in your Q&A or in your GoToWebinar interface and just go ahead and type up your question, and we'll go ahead and address those appropriately, probably towards the end of the webinar, so I don't get distracted if I look at the questions. But please do type those in, and we will get to those, and I'll make sure that we verbally respond to those at the end and get those in the recording as well for those that may have missed out. So with that, sit back, relax, and enjoy. And we're going to go ahead and start with managing Windows 10 migrations, how you get there, and then what are some of the stuff you do once you get over to a Windows 10 platform. So with that, Jay, did you have any slides you were going to present?
Yes, Wally.
Okay.
For some reason, I cannot share my screen here. So
I just did
never mind.
Yep. I had to make you presenter, so you're good. Yep, and I see your Windows 10 desktop there.
Perfect. So what I wanted to walk through today around the Windows 10 operating system. So as everybody hopefully on this call knows now, Microsoft has made Windows 10 a servicing model. So servicing in the industry is not new, right? Our mobile phone devices have been doing this for a very long time, where you just do an in-place upgrade from one operating system to another, and then which adds features and new functionality, right? In the past with Windows 95, XP, 7, besides service packs and how to fix it, there's really not a lot of new things being introduced into those operating systems. So with Windows 10, Microsoft said, let's take that model and make that into the desktop operating system. So now Windows 10 as a service, and over the last couple of years, Microsoft had about a few updates to Windows 10 that added new features and functionality, with the last one being 1703 and the new one being 1709 right around the corner. So I'm going to just kind of go over a couple of things and making sure everybody's on the same page around the Windows 10 operating system itself. So when Microsoft releases a new version of Windows 10, right before that release happens, it's in what's called the insider preview mode, right? So as a insider preview person, you have the capability of having the latest and greatest beta code of that Windows 10 operating system to start testing your applications, testing out the new features, documenting all the things that you want to take advantage of or maybe disable through group policies and so forth. So I highly recommend anyone that's a desktop person, end user compute, SCCM, that helps and supports end users, and that's going to be the end user support folks for Windows 10. I highly recommend getting your second machine or a virtual machine on the Windows Insider preview, so you could start testing. So even with 1709 right around the corner, Microsoft already started building out the next version on 1803, right? And you can start getting those features right away. And you know, and previously Microsoft used to call a general release of a branch of Windows 10 a current branch, right? A current branch over the last couple of months, Microsoft basically said that whole current branch and current branch for business model, we're going to kind of take that away because it's too confusing, right? So what they now call is the semi-annual channel, and it's more it's more defined on when those releases happen. Last year with 1607, we only had one release all year last year, which happened around July, August timeframe, right? That was 1607. So in the as an IT person, as someone that manages my end users and image and so forth, I can't rely on, you know, a infrequent type of releases where I don't know when it's going to come out and I got to start planning for it. So now Microsoft said, let's make this a little bit easier. We're going to have 2 releases a year around the March timeframe and around the September timeframe. So September releases will be probably in the next, you know, first couple of weeks of October. March releases will be in the first couple of weeks of April. So what the semi-annual channel is that when it first comes out, you always want to test it out, right? So that was the current branch model, right? You test it out, you get the early adopters, initial pilots, you want to test all the different hardwares, make sure there's no new updated drivers that broke anything, right? And then what used to be called the current branch for business is still the semi-annual channel, right? Because in the past, it was the same bit, it was the same download, right? When Microsoft said it was a current branch for business, basically all they said was, we tested this, it's been on millions of computers, our telemetry showed it, so now we were declaring this business ready. But it was confusing for a lot of companies, and I've done over 30 Windows 10 workshops, and a lot of companies like, wait a minute, it's the same bit, current branch and current branch for business, so why can't we just start deploying when it's current branch? And I said, you can. If your testing shows that everything is working and you went through the proper UAT and pilot, then you could continue rolling it out. So that's why now it's just called a semi-annual channel. You, as the IT person, as a desktop administrator, you decide on how you want that rolled out. And you don't have to wait for a declaration of current branch for business. If it's working for you in the first 30 days of release and you see your pilot users are happy and there's no issues, go and move forward with it, right? And the long-term servicing channel used to be called the long-term servicing branch. That's still out there, right? That still exists for those specialized machines. Those are not for the everyday end users, not for your sales folks and marketing folks and accountants. It's for those specialized systems, like hospitals may take advantage of it for Windows 10 machines that are connected to X-ray machines, very mission-critical systems. Manufacturing use it for assembly lines and so forth. So you cannot have those machines go down or something not working because it stops production, and then that's loss of revenue. So that's still out there, and the last version is 1607, and they don't update that every year because that's the whole idea of long-term, is to have a more of a static build that's only touched every couple of years, every 3 years, and I think the next release, what I hear, is won't be until 2019, right? So that's why long-term servicing branch is not for everyday users. And if you put users on those long-term servicing channels, you will not get the latest and greatest features that Microsoft releases in Windows 10. So from a deployment of cycle, right? So we have the engineering builds. All the great people at Microsoft are writing the next version of Windows 10 all the time. Every single day, they're already writing for 1803, 1809. They're just writing the next releases. Then it goes into a broader Microsoft internal validation, and then it goes into the insider preview that I talked about with people like us. We get to test it out, and then once it's done, it goes into just a general release, right? The semi-annual channel, right? And then how you deploy that, it's up to you, right? You might want to start with an IT pilot, right? As IT folks, we eat our own dog food. So we want to make sure that process is working, that there's no issues, and I go ahead and make changes to what I need to make changes to, because if something broke, I need to go maybe modify that test sequence in SCCM to remove an application, do the upgrade, and then reinstall the updated version. So I want to make sure that process is first tested on IT, and then I start finding some friendly users in my organization, the pilot users, the early adopters that could be a good champion for that upgrade process, that they're going to give you good feedback. They're going to give you lots of notes on what's working and what's not working. So when you're ready for broad deployment, you have the minimum number of issues that are reported, right? So use those pilot users not only for testing the imaging process and the upgrade process, but also use those pilot users to help you with the change communication, which is going to be key with Windows 10. It's not a small patch that's going to take 5-10 minutes and reboot. It might take half hour, 45 minutes, hour, maybe more, depending on the system, SSD drives versus non-SSD drives. There's a lot of factors, right? So you want to make sure that change communication is solid. So when you get into that broad deployment, you minimize the cost of the help desk because you communicated everything that user needs to know about that build, the new features, the reboots, the length of time, anything like that. Yeah. And then this is going to continue to happen, right? So 6 months of Insider Preview branch, you're going to plan and prepare. Using that Insider Preview is going to help you understand what the features are and what you may want to communicate to the end users, maybe what you don't want to communicate with the end users, like you might want to disable a GPO, but that's the time for you to prepare is using the Insider Preview. And then once it's in the release of a semi-annual channel, you want to pilot that. And depending on your organization, what your best practices are as your change management, you might want to put that out there for a pilot for a couple of months, 4 months, and making sure there's no issues. And then you start the broader deployment. Again, the pilot, it's about, usually our customers usually do about 3-4 months of pilot, especially the larger ones, because they, across multiple different departments and groups and offices and regions and languages. So they want to make sure it's solid. But in your testing, if it shows that in first 30 days, first 2 weeks, that you're not having any issues, you can start that broader deployment earlier, right? And then this process is going to be key because guess what? It's going to repeat again, right? So if you're looking at 1703, as you start deploying 1703 and you get into a broader deployment, you're already preparing for 1709. You're preparing to pilot 1709. As you're deploying 1703 to a broad set of users, you're probably getting ready for that pilot of 1709, and then it's going to be continuous. At least once a year, you want to manage these updates, right? So if you look at the rhythm that's happened in the last couple of years, 1507 was the initial release of Windows 10, and then after that, a few months later, we had 1511, which was the first real branch outside of the RTM. And then last year, in 2016, all year we only had one, right, which was the anniversary update, which was 1607. And those numbers do mean something, right? If you guys are not familiar with it already, those first 2 digits is the year and the last 2 digits is the month, right? So 1607 is July 2016, but the actual release might happen a little bit after July, like sometime early August, and 1607 happened around August 11th or something like that, and 1703, and now we have 1709 coming, right? So this is continuous, and so that's why your process, your image engineering, and how you can do it is going to be really, really important for you guys to make sure that that's solidified, that and it's going to be also a change, right? You're never going to have a process that's going to be 100% every single time. So that process is going to be a living document that you're going to tweak and you're going to get better and better. But putting that process in place and document it is going to be the key to your success. Yeah. Now, if this works, having an issue before, I'm going to just show you a couple of things. If not, if this doesn't work, there was a couple of things I wanted to show you in the SCCM console, but having some connectivity issues here. So what I might do is just turn that back into Wally to continue with this presentation. And if this comes up a little bit later, I'll come in and show you. Yep. So I'm having a little connectivity issue right now with the internet into our demo environment. So Wally, I'm going to turn this back to you while I work on that demo environment, and then maybe towards the end of the day, if it's end of the webinar, I'll come back to it.
All right, that is fine. Thanks, Jay. So I'll go ahead and take over presentation again, and we should be good to go there. Okay. All right. So and I know as Jay mentioned in his talk there about the change in terminology from current branch to business, and current branch for business and long-term servicing branch over to the semi-annual channel and the long-term servicing channel. They're trying to make things easier for us because it's all those different names being thrown out. It was hard, and they're trying to get, as Jay mentioned, more prescriptive around when things are coming out. Again, like he said, only one release last year, and they're just about to produce the second production release of Windows 10, 17, in this case 1709, release at any moment now. But you can think about the long-term servicing branch or long-term servicing channel now, as it's called, as more of the old days, where it's only going to be every few years you get a new operating system. So, but it's there so that you don't have to deal with it as much as you were having to recently, and you can just, like for the mission critical systems you mentioned. So.
Okay, Wally, I'm back. You want to make me presenter again?
Oh, okay. Sure. We can do that. Oops. Oh, there you go. Okay. Yep, got your screen.
So thank you so much. So this is the obviously the configuration manager, widely known as SCCM config manager, and this is 1706 of the branch. So what I want to kind of show you is the operating system pieces of it, right? So with Windows 10 and the latest version of configuration manager, which is now as a service, we have the Windows 10 servicing node here in config manager, where I could actually see a dashboard view of what's going on in my Windows 10 environment, what version, what branch on, or now channel, right, 1607, 1703, and so forth. So I could get a better view of what's going on. And then also at the bottom, I see a little timeline, right? It kind of shows me not only all the different releases of Windows 10, but I can also see what's coming to end of life and so forth. So I can get a better idea of where I'm at in my environment, what I need to upgrade, and so forth. And then if you're familiar with SCCM, and hopefully most of you are, you know, you're used to what's called the ADRs, right? The automatic deployment rules within the software updates piece. So Microsoft created kind of an ADR for Windows 10, which is called a service plan. So if I create a service plan for Windows 10, I could actually define a automatic way of approving a Windows 10 feature update, the way it gets deployed and tested into what collections and time frame and so forth. So if I say this is a service plan for 1703, if I go into the next, I target the collections, and then I could go into my pilot, my current branch alpha, for example, and click next. And then I go through, is it current branch, a current branch for business, right? Obviously, this naming is going to change in future releases because it's a semi-annual channel. But I could say, create the service plan 10 days, 30 days or so after the release of once it's identified through the sync process. Then go ahead and I'm looking for English. I'm looking for, if it's a required and so forth. And then once I pick something, I could actually do a preview and see what kind of results is based on that filter comes out, right? So I could see, here's everything that's going to hit. And obviously, that's a lot of updates here. So I probably don't want all of them, but, so I want to filter it out a little bit further. But in this case, I'll just kind of continue to kind of show you. And this is a familiar dialogue, right? Just any software updates or application pushes in Config Manager, you see this, right? What time is it? What's the deadline? And a lot of times, a lot of our customers are now using the Software Center to be able to do the self-servicing for the users instead of forcing these feature updates on them, which might take half hour, or so forth. I might make this available for 2 months, 90 days, whatever it is, and let them do it. It's, and part of my communication is go to the Software Center, and if you're going to be in a meeting for the next hour, hour and a half, or 5 o'clock before you go home, go ahead and run these updates. So I don't force it, and I also don't take that hit on my network because I'm forcing everybody at the same time. So I might say, do this, for as soon as possible or a certain time. And then maybe put the deadline for maybe, a month or 3 months out, right? So let the users go ahead and do it. So then everything else here is just like any other software package, click next, 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 and create a deployment package. So I could actually create a service plan for my alpha, my IT folks, my pilot users, and then the broader rings, right? Broader deployment, ring 1, ring 2, ring 3, however you want to do it. Now, the downside right now of the servicing is that I can't customize. I can't customize the servicing on something that I need to do before or after. Because if my testing showed, for example, that Symantec antivirus broke during my in-place upgrade, well, the servicing is not going to let me uninstall and do other things with it, right? So that's when maybe I want to take advantage of what's built in is our task sequences, right? So within the task sequence, we have a new task sequence template, which allows me to do an upgrade an operating system from an upgrade package. So in our case, we already have a Windows 10 upgrade package ready. So we have 1703, 1607, and 1511. And then so I created a task sequence earlier, which is just called Windows 10 upgrade to 1703, right? And this allows me to get a little bit more customized into my process versus the servicing, which allows me just to push the update just like a patch, right? Now I could actually check the upgrade readiness, make sure there's enough memory, enough disk space, and so forth. Then I'll do the upgrade of the operating system, in this case 1703, based on my upgrade package. And then I could actually restart the computer. I could do other things like install other applications I want, right? Maybe run some PowerShell scripts to clean up the inbox applications that may have come back. This is the famous Michael Niehaus PowerShell script that's been out there for a year and a half, 2 years. So I want to maybe customize this and run this script that might, take my application that came back, because that is an issue. Sometimes it does come back. So I want to do some cleanups right there, right? And so I could do things before and after, and take advantage of the power of the task sequences for my in-place upgrades. Okay. That's why I wanted to show you some of the differences in the configuration manager environment around the Windows 10 in-place upgrade. Servicing is obviously fairly, it's a new thing that happened in the last couple of years, the service plans, and as well as the in-place upgrade task sequence, you could take advantage to customize that further. And then if there's any other questions, just put that in the window and we'll answer those questions at the end of the presentation. From this point on, I'll turn it over to Wally for his presentation. Thank you, everybody.
So thanks, Jay. Very nicely done, and I'd love to see the stuff in the ConfigMan console. So I'm sure you're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. That I know, and we both know this, that, and probably a lot of people do, Microsoft's preferred method for you to manage your Windows 10 servicing is using the Windows 10 servicing plans. However, with that said, they know that there's limitations in the servicing plans right now. So in practice, I'm sure if I ask you, Jay, you're going to say that the vast majority of people are wanting to use the servicing plan just because it's a fire and forget thing with the servicing plans and the rings and basically the ADRs. But realistically, they're winding up having to go the upgrade task sequence so that they have that ability of customizing the start menu and all the other apps and everything else that they're having to do.
Absolutely, that's what we're seeing. A lot of our customers right now are using the task sequence, and hopefully, in the future builds, and while you may have more insights, that they allow servicing to do pre and post scripts like they do right now with the server updates that's available in the collections, where I could actually, use that for. I could do a pre and post script when I'm patching servers. Hopefully, that's available in the servicing plans in the near future.
Yeah, they do know it. All of us as MVPs, we beat up on them about that, and they say, yes, we know, we'll get there. Baby steps. It takes us a while to get moving. So, but that is what the goal is, that people would move over to the servicing plans, just because, again, they're very much like the ADRs, which, as you mentioned, Jay, people are using and should be really familiar with it from all the software update stuff. So that's the goal. But it's very, very cool to be able to get there and have that flexibility in Config Manager. And that's one of the cool things I like about Config Manager. There's very seldom is it only one single way you have to follow to get something accomplished. There's usually multiple different ways of accomplishing a single goal. For example, next week in our presentation, when we talk about software distribution, I'm sure we'll talk about the factors, like 5-6 different ways in Configuration Manager to deploy software. It's just a matter of figuring out what is the best way for you. So here with Windows 10, you got these servicing plans, which may work for a lot of people. But if you need to have that uniqueness, that customizability, those post action capabilities, then yeah, it's the task sequences are the primarily the way to go now until they get as you say, the pre and post script stuff added into the servicing plan. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing just to note, I'm actually in Houston right now, and I did a Windows 10 workshop all day yesterday at the Microsoft office. And I get these questions a lot. What's the best practice of deploying this, right? And is there a best practice? Maybe there's some written best practice out there. For me, and as Wally said, best practice a lot of times is what works for you, right? So make sure that you go through the process, and like I said, the documenting of the process is going to be important to you. But best practice on how to get Windows 10 out there is what works for you and your environment. Every environment, every customers we go to, it's different. Applications that are different. The hardware, everything's different, right? So that's what's the best practice. A lot of times I tell them it's what works for you, just like Wally just kind of said.
Yep. So you listen to the feedback, you listen to the suggestions, the watch presentations or watch videos or whatever it is. So you watch that to get the ideas of ways that other people are doing it and how they're accomplishing it. And then you try those out in your lab, you test it out, you refine, as Jay was mentioning, you take your document and you keep tweaking it a little bit to know, yeah, I tried this from somebody else, and oh, that PowerShell script worked for me, so I'm going to add that in. And you just adopt your procedures to make you more efficient and to keep your end users and management happier, because of the fact that you're being a lot more efficient and secure and timely in what you're doing. So yeah, that's one of the things about best practices. Let's see, yeah, everybody has their own best practices. Microsoft will state what they think is the best practice, but in reality, that may not work for you given your environment. So cool. Okay. So thanks, Jay. And Jay will be around through the rest of the presentation. We have questions and so on. So let's go ahead and move on. So Jay talked about a little bit about how you get to Windows 10 and then keeping Windows 10 up to date, and talked about the whole theory behind Windows 10 as a service. So let's talk about how you can use the Cireson product, the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager, and how it can help you out with this process of securely and easily getting Windows 10 out into your organization. Oops, get context here so I can, there we go. So just real quickly, Cireson, we're a software and services company. We like to leave the services to our partners like Netrix, but we do some as well as necessary. But primarily we're a software company, so we got software around Service Manager and making service management much more of an effective process for you. And much more of an application that you can go ahead and use. Asset management to take Configuration Manager data, which is a wealth of it out there in Config Manager. Just can't do a whole lot with it. So bringing that into Service Manager and allow you to modify that, enhance that with your lifecycle information for cost centers, for purchase orders, for cost of objects, for your warranties, your all your contracts, service support contracts and so on, and then location code information. And then Configuration Manager, we mentioned that last week, and it showed you, if you're in the presentation last week, I gave you a quick little overview of the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager, which you'll see momentarily here as well, from an IT service desk perspective. And today we'll go from maybe a desktop support or server support guy having to do the imaging process. And then we also have 4 free apps out there that you can utilize without just download and implement those in your Configuration Manager environment. Just some stats on us: over 1,200 customers, and I think it's 65 countries worldwide now. So a lot of work out there, a lot of customers. But we're really happy about is our work with our partners and our 99% renewal rate. So people that buy into our solutions find the value of it and the benefits of it, so they renew year over year. And those that wind up not are usually ones that decide to move off of Service Manager as a platform. And then just a few of our different customers in some of the different industries. So if you might find your specific industry there, you'll see 1 or 2 different customers there that fit in that area for you, but all the different platforms out there in all the different markets. Then lastly, the vast majority of our products sit on top of System Center. We have one product called our password reset solution. So if you don't want your help desk to have to be involved with end users when they forget their password, there's a self-service solution for that doesn't require any System Center, but all the rest of our products do. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now, again, is the Windows 10 and how you can use the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager to make your life easier in getting to Windows 10. So we've created a web interface. So we think it's very, very intuitive and much easier to navigate and get your work done than the native Configuration Manager console. Not as many workspaces to go to or nodes to get access to or options. We try to make it very, very easy for you to see what you need to do, get the information you need, and then get your job done. And you're not tied, obviously, to an installation of the Configuration Manager console because it's a website you're going to. We want to expose the appropriate data for you to get you what you need so you can get your job done as quickly as possible. For example, we showed you last week how the help desk can very quickly and easily find a user's primary computer, then look at the software that's installed on it, and look at the hardware inventory information that we expose for you in a much more simple manner than Resource Explorer, so that they find those key attributes to make sure they have enough disk space, enough processor, enough RAM, there are no conflicting services, whatever, so that they can go ahead and then support that end user, troubleshoot their problem. Not only do we want to expose the data from Configuration Manager, we want to make it so that you can perform some tasks that you would normally do in the Configuration Manager console, such as creating and deploying software, or our topic for today, creating and deploying task sequences. But not only do we want to let you create and deploy those, we want you to be able to have enhancements. We want to give you an enhanced interaction with that experience. In this case, what we'll talk about, and you'll see in my demos, is the ability of having templates which will help answer or preset all those values that you would have to set when you're creating a task sequence or creating an application or package and then deploying those. Commence you'll see here momentarily as well. That's our operating system deployment front end. So when you're doing Pixie deployments, you don't want to have that bare Pixie screen that pops up and gives you a blank list of task sequences. You want to have some interaction with the end user. So commence is our front end to allow the maybe end user, but probably more likely your desktop support person, to interact with the imaging process to pick and choose some options, and that will guide you through the configuration of that task sequence to launch it off and utilize it appropriately. And all this has configurable security so that you can control which features, not only of operating system deployment, but also the rest of the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager, that each individual user in a support group would have access to. And then, of course, this is something that you have to have visibility into your status on. So we have dashboards to help you view your status, for example, for deployments, and then the ability of picking appropriate reports for you. Task sequences, maybe you want to see a task sequence deployment report, and just linking that and making it available to your desktop support team, so once they've deployed a task sequence, they can very easily launch the Configuration Manager report and see what the status of that deployment is. And then the personas that we're really targeting are the middle three personas. Your service desk analyst, which is kind of what I concentrated on last week. Today will be more of the desktop server support team. We're more likely that people would be doing the operating system imaging, not as much of your desktop analyst, although certainly could be there as well. And then IT, from a management perspective, they want to see what's going on, what your status is, what your client health rate is, what your patch status is, how vulnerable are we, and just using a reporting scenario from there. End users will be happier because their problems are resolved more quickly because your service desk can get the information they need more quickly and deploy the software or whatever necessary. And you as a ConfigMan admin, you're still going to be in the Configuration Manager console, modifying your boot images or importing operating system images and so on. But you may be in a meeting and not have access to your laptop with the console on it. Somebody asks you a question, well, you can just go to the conference room's laptop or PC that's in there and connect up to the website for the Configuration Manager portal and get the information you're looking for very easily without having to, again, RDP someplace else. So with that background, let's go ahead and jump in and do some demos. The first thing I'm going to do for you is kick off a Windows 10 deployment. So you guys have all done this before, and what I have here is a Hyper-V bare metal client. So just a bare metal client sitting here, and this is our first screening commence. So it's gone through the WinPE phase, and it's launched off our commence user interface. So first thing you have to do is log in with valid credentials, and I'm going to log in as a member of my desktop support team. And if I typed everything correctly, so now what it's doing is validating what objects in Configuration Manager I should have access to as a desktop support person, and it's going to bring up the Commence UI here in a second that will then let me walk through that deployment experience, picking and choosing those options that I have available to me. So you do have that security aspect there. So if I walk into Jay's headquarters and plug in my laptop, I'm not able to get his corporate image for Windows 10 or anything else because I don't have a login capability when I do my Pixie boot. So here's the commence front end. And you can see right now I pick an operating system deployment template, and I'll show you these in our portal here just once I get this kicked off. And I only have access to one for workstations. And we have a default naming scheme. So a lot of you guys want to have a naming sequence that's followed for all your computers. Well, when you're doing, if you don't hard code it in Pixie or in your task sequence or have an interaction somehow, you're going to wind up with a lot of mini nt dash something, some random name in there. So we let you designate a naming format. And in my case, I'm doing a workstation, so it's defaulted my name to WKS. and then 001. That's the next number available in numbering sequence, and I'll show you what that looks like momentarily. I go to the operating system tab, and now I select my operating system. So here's my Windows 10 deployment. As soon as I select that, it fills in some values for me as to what my operating system is. I want this to be Wally's computer, so I'll set Wally as a primary user. If I have integration with MDT, I can go ahead and select any available organizational units, and I've only given this support person access to one called the Workstations OU, and I've gave them access to the Workstation Software MDT role. So I'll go ahead and select it. Now, when I click the inventory button, this will let me, or tab, this lets me see a quick hardware inventory real time of the computer I'm trying to image. So in this case, it's this bare metal Hyper-V VM. So it gives me IP address, and my MAC address, and my asset tag, serial number, SM BIOS good, memory, just making sure that I think all this is set and can allow me to do my imaging. That's all I have to do. Then I would click next. But before I do that, we also have this decommission tab here, which is not appropriate for an imaging scenario. But the scenario where decommission is worthwhile is you guys all have 3 to 5 year hardware cycles, where at the end of that, you might get rid of the hardware. So you might donate it off to charity. So I could take this computer, load commence, go to the decommission tab and say decommission this computer. It would show me all my hard drives and partitions. Then I just pick how I want to format those, a quick format, a normal format, or a secure format that might take days to actually zero out the hard drive. So I pick how I want to decommission this computer and formatting, and then when it's all done, it's flatten the hard drive and I can go ahead and put it back in stock, or I can then donate it off to charity or throw it in the trash heap or whatever's appropriate for you. So I'm not going to decommission. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I'll click next. Gets my summary of what I chose to do. Here's my computer name, my MAC address, the task sequence, and so on I picked. I'll click next. And now what Commence is doing, it's creating this computer, WKS001, in Configuration Manager. Once it's created in Configuration Manager, which it was done now, and now it's added it to the proper collection. So it added it to the collection that the install Windows 10 task sequence was targeted to. And so it's added it there. Now it's in the process of retrieving that task sequence, and it's going to reboot this computer using the boot image that's associated with my install Windows 10 task sequence, and it will kick off that imaging process. So that's really what Commence is doing. It's giving me that UI, letting me walk through and have some interaction with the deployment process. It then creates the computer in the database. If it's not already there, you don't have to use unknown computers. You can pre-register them if you want to. And then adds the computer, puts it in the proper collection, and kicks off that real task sequence for your real imaging. And there you see it just did the partitioning the hard drive, downloading the boot image, and it's off and running. So while that does its work, it takes, as Jay mentioned, it can take a half an hour or so. It may not be done before we're done here, but we'll let him go ahead and do his work. Let's go over to my site server image, and let me just show you some of those things that we saw in Commence. So if I go to Operating System Deployment Settings, here's my OSD templates. Remember, the first one we saw was New Workstations. You can see the New Workstation template is using the Workstations numbering sequence, which you can see the naming format here when I zoom in, WKS, that's what we saw, 001, because it shows you that when I show you the number sequence here, it'll show you the starting number was 1, it goes up to 20. And if I right click on this, you'll see that my desktop support team, which user 2 is a member of, he has access to that numbering that OSD template. But my new servers template, I don't want the desktop support guy to have access to, so he doesn't have rights to it. And my server support team, I would give him rights to it. So he would have access to that one. Now this OSD template was looking at number sequences. So my number sequencing, here's the workstation's number sequence, and you can see off to the far right-hand side, the starting number was 1. That's why my first computer was WKS, which is my hard-coded portion of the name, and then 001 for the first one. And then this will increment to say my starting number is now 2, and so I'll have 18 left. And obviously you'll be able to see here on permissions that my desktop support member has access to that numbering sequence. Whereas the servers with a different naming sequence or numbering sequence, as you can see, it's 20 to 29, my desktop support guy won't have access to it, and I would give that to my server support team. And then OUs, Because remember, I had the workstations OU. I actually have 3 OUs in here, computers, servers, and workstations. And the only one that was available was workstations. So if I go here again, you'll see desktop support has rights to that. So those are those components that you saw inside the commence front end. Now, let me show you how easy it is to create, once I've got all this stuff done, now how easy it is to create a task sequence inside the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager. So I'll go over to Chrome, and you can see in Chrome, I'm logged in as user 2, that exact same user that I was using in Commence, who's my desktop support person. So I'm logged in there, and you see I have access to my workstations. If I go here, did I give them? Yeah, access to non-clients. Okay, that'll refresh here in a little bit to have WKS001 in there. He's not there yet. Okay, but if I wanted to go on task sequences, so here are my 2 task sequences that I've given this guy access to, and here's the install Windows 10 one that he was actually deploying as part of that commence solution. And there's also one very similar to what Jay showed you for the upgrade to Windows 10 using an in-place upgrade. Mine would just be the bare bones one that comes out of the box. When you walk through the wizard, I didn't have an install application or run another script like Jay did on that. So, but I want to go ahead and create one. So I'm going to go to New Task Sequence, OSD Task Sequence. So in your mind here, as much as you can, try and think about the Configuration Manager console experience of creating an operating system deployment task sequence and walking through that wizard and all those different pages. So here I'll say demo with remote manage. And if I click on the images tab, you see it's got boot image x86 and it's got partition and configure task sequence for BitLocker. Windows has randomly generate, nothing else. And all the rest of the tabs are all defaulted. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to show you the power of the templates. I'm going to go ahead and load a template that I've given this user access to, Windows 10 deployments. I'll select that template and I'll click load. Now we'll see what it did with all those different pages and all those different settings. So it just loaded that template. Now go to images. Now notice it's preset to do the 64-bit boot image and load my Windows 10 image and turned off the BitLocker because it's a Hyper-V VM, so it doesn't work there. On my Windows, it's randomly generating, but it's using Wally at Cireson for the username and organization name. Configure network, it's automatically got my domain in there, so all I have to do is punch in my account credentials. It's already got the username, but my password for administrator who can join the computer to the domain. It's got my install client configuration manager properties there. State migration, yeah, it's going to use USMT by default. But if bare metal, I wouldn't have to do a capture user state because there's not going to be any state on a bare metal client, but I could leave that if I wish. It's not going to affect anything. Install updates, it's going to evaluate software updates from cache scan results, which again is not going to be appropriate for bare metal, but if it was an in-place upgrade, that might be beneficial and save some time. And I said I wanted to do add remote manage, so I'll just go ahead and pick this application and add it into the list. No, I don't want to remember that password. And that's it. So I name my task sequence, I load my template, and then I just verify all those different settings I want, make any adjustments, click finish. And here's my 2 task sequences. Right now what's happening is it's going through the SMS provider into Configuration Manager, creating that task sequence in Configuration Manager. And now when I hit refresh, it should be here in the CMP. So there's my task sequence that I created. Now, if I have rights to deploy that, I can just right click and do deploy software. And I showed you the deploy process last week. This guy has access to both of them, but just walk through that again for you. Here's my task sequence. I'll select it. I'm going to go to my Windows 10 deployments collection because with the standard software distribution wizard, you have to pick your collection. You can say automatically create a collection on demand if you want to, but I'll go ahead and pick that one. And I'm not going to add any computers to that collection because this is bare metal, so I'll leave that, but I could if I wanted to. And then pick my deployment template. So again, notice there's nothing really set here as far as any unique parameters on most of these tabs. Now I'm going to go ahead and load my OSD task sequence template, and notice now it changed me to required purpose and only media and Pixie. Scheduling is as soon as possible. User experience, allow run independently of assignments, show task sequence progress. And I didn't think I had anything listed here. So the template then, again, not only is it a template for creating your software, but there's templates also for the deployment of your software, whether it's, in this case, operating system deployments, or in next week's presentation, I'll show you creating applications packages through templates, and then the deployment process with that as well. So that's all the harder it is to create a task sequence utilizing the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager. Again, just go to New, have rights, have New Task Sequence, and then load your template, and that will have all your values. So if you don't have a template, then you just walk through, but hopefully it's still an easier interface to navigate than the core Configuration Manager portal is. Now with that, I want to check on my status. So if I go to the reports, I look on, wait a minute, I don't have any reports here for task sequences, and I can't add a report here as this user. So if I go back over to my administrator, now I go to reports, and I'll see that, nope, I don't have a task sequence report linked here. So I'll just go to reports, I'll link report, and I'll just cruise on down to my task sequence deployments. And I'll just take all task sequence deployments. I'll take that one, I'll link that in, and I want to make sure my desktop support person can see that. So I'll just do a right click and permissions and desktop support. Now if I go back over to the desktop support person, do a refresh, that report appears. I just go ahead and run that report. And this is pure SRS, so it's just a matter of waiting for the same report that you would see from Configuration Manager using the same report viewer code as Configuration Manager. So it's doing all the, the SRS work. So there's nothing unique here other than the fact that I, as the user of the portal, didn't have to figure out which category, which folder to go to find that report and which report. It's sitting there and it says task sequences. So, okay, that's the report I want to run. I don't have 477 or whatever the number is reports available that I have to go wade through. And of course, that would be scoped down when you use role-based administration inside Configuration Manager. But I just went ahead and picked the one report that that looked right for what I needed to do. And here's my install Windows 10. So I'll go ahead and pick that deployment and see if we get what we got back from status. We got one that's currently running. And if we go click on that and drill in, and we'll see that we're on step 20. So we're getting kind of close. There's the computer name, WKS001. I think it's 25 steps, that 25 or 26 steps. So it's getting close in there. So that's what the status of that report is right now. And the last thing is setting up Windows in Configuration Manager. So we're getting pretty close there. So that's reporting process on it. Now I didn't give this guy access to the dashboard, but back in configuration, I'll go to Configuration Manager console in just a second. Back as a full admin or somebody has access to the dashboard, I mentioned the dashboard. We have the dashboard here, which will show you now I'm up to 7 computers. It was 6 before. And I've now got deployments going on. This will summarize when we get anything back in Configuration Manager, and I haven't done any summarization in Configuration Manager, so these values haven't changed. But here's my drill in. If I go to the deployments, here's my install Windows 10 task sequence that I just kicked off, and right now I have unknown status because nothing's been summarized in Configuration Manager. So if I go to the ConfigMan console, go to monitoring, go to deployments, and our CMP is just pulling data from Configuration Manager. Here's our task sequence. Let's go ahead and do a run summarization on it. Let that set for 17 seconds, assuming that it's not busy summarizing anything else. It usually takes about 17 seconds for the summarization task to occur. And then we'll take him and we'll do a refresh. And now we got in progress. So we got in progress status, and we can click on view status down here in Config Manager. And nothing success yet. We're in progress, WKS001. So he's in progress, and if I drill in here, he's probably a little bit further than the 20 steps that we saw earlier. Yeah, he just listed 19. So right about the same spot it was in the report. Now I mentioned that I added that computer. So if I go to Assets and Compliance, here's Devices, and here you see WKS opens. It's already reporting back into the client, WKS001. So just waiting for the reporting to get back in. But he already has, it looks like he's already done, is a client, it's active, and it's a current build there. So that was a client that got added. Before it was saying obviously no for client, and it's added to the Windows 10 deployments collection. If I show members, it'll be WKS001. So he's added it in there already. So that means I should be able to go to, yep, there he is, Windows 10. If I log in as Wally, and obviously it takes Windows a little while when you first log in for it to do all this customization and personalization. So he's sitting there in that deployment process. So that wasn't actually too bad at all. I'm getting that deployment done. So then when that information gets all finalized through Configuration Manager and summarized in the database, we'll be able to go ahead and see if we get any update here yet. So now it shows in progress here. So as soon as Configuration Manager comes back with a success, we'll be able to go ahead and click on the success and get some, or on success. Right now it's in progress. And not showing him there yet, but he'll come in. So that'll be the dashboard. And then here it'll report in when he reports in with hardware inventory. Right now we've reported a no operating system. This is based off of hardware inventory, so we need to wait for that new Configuration Manager client to generate hardware inventory, which by default is randomly within 4 hours after the client has been installed. So it's all coming together there for you as far as things happening through that. So we looked at the deployment process, and just to show you one of the things that Jay kind of referenced here in his environment, I'll just show you in mine. He had that task sequence for install or upgrading to Windows 10. And you just walk through the wizard, and this is the task sequence that would create by default. As he showed you, the check readiness for upgrade, which operating system and processor and CPU. So memory, CPU, and then your client versus server operating systems, and then doing the upgrade and that upgrade packet I was using, and then restart computer. And that's where Jay went ahead and customized with post-processing actions for installing the application and running that other script, whereas you wouldn't have that with the servicing plan as of right now anyway. So. Alrighty, so that pretty well takes care of it. So you should have seen how, from Jay's environment, how to manage your Windows 10 once you get there. And what I showed you was using the commence solution to deploy a bare metal environment. It can also do computer reinstall. So if you run commence on an existing computer, it'll detect that it's already in the database and it'll go into a reinstall mode as opposed to a bare metal mode. So it does that. But I showed you also how to create your task sequences for operating system deployment, and how simple it is with the templates, which made it very, very easy to create and then deploy that task sequence. And then showed you the configuration inside the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager to interact with commence for your OSD templates, your number sequencing, and your MDT roles. Well, I guess I didn't show you that. To go back over here real quick. Back as the full admin. Just show you MDT roles. I actually had 2 MDT roles, but the desktop support person did not have access to the server software MDT role, so that's why it didn't show up. He only had access to the workstation software MDT role. Been interacting with the MDT roles and then the deployment process. So hopefully that gets you a little excited about what you saw and what the capabilities are there. So as we get to the point of getting to questions here in just a moment, you guys all know, and I think you've heard both Jay and I talk about how much we love Configuration Manager, and we've both been doing it for a long time. For me, since before SMS 1.0 was released, even before it was named SMS 1.0. So I think it's a fantastic product. That's the only reason I'm still doing it, is because I love the product, so it's fantastic. And you really should not be on any release less than current branch. You can't really do anything with any of the last few releases of Windows 10, even on ConfigMan 2012. Only the first two releases, 1507 and 1511, were supported there. Nothing past. So 1607, 1703, and anything going forward will not be supported on ConfigMan 2012, and certainly not on ConfigMan 2007. So obviously Windows 10 is the newest client operating system for Microsoft, and they're in their 4 releases so far, and 5th release is just around the corner. So it's easy to get to it using ConfigMgr as your deployment process. One thing we didn't mention here, you guys might have heard of a new product from Microsoft called Windows Autopilot. So that's another thing you could look at to get to Windows 10 if you're an Intune customer. But if you're really a configuration manager customer, it's not really that beneficial for you, because it does require the Intune license, and it's for smaller shops. You don't get all the same power as you have with Configuration Manager. And once you get to Windows 10, either from Config Manager or however, you'll find it's pretty easy to manage. There's lots of cool things in Configuration Manager that take advantage of Windows 10 specifically. And then, as I showed you in my demo, hopefully you saw some cool things to help you with your ability of making it easier for your teams to create and deploy task sequences for Windows 10, utilizing the Cireson Portal for Configuration Manager. In fact, if you like what you saw, there is the ability for you to download a trial version of it, or a community version. It's a free version. Now, I'll caution you, with the community version, you can't do any deployments, and commence is not part of that solution. So you wouldn't be able to test out commence or deploy operating system images. You can't create anything there. You can't create anything that would go back to Config Manager like software. So you can't create task sequences, you can't deploy them, you can't create software, but you can view your inventory of clients, you can see your computers, users, software, task sequences. You can create your CMP objects like your security, role-based administration settings, and so on. If you really want to try out some of those things, then at that same link on the screen, you can get a trial license. So you can get a 30-day trial license, which will unlock all those other features from the Community Edition, and it's fully functioning, just time-bound for 30 days. And we have some other videos up on that same website, and some screenshots and marketing blurbs up there. So very, very easy for you to play around with it. We actually even have a couple of an Azure environment up and running where you have some personas you can go ahead and play around with, but it's not doing any operating system deployments up there either, because it's in Azure. So, all right, with that, it's question and answer time. So we do have a question in the queue that I'll read here in just a second. Outside that, please do go ahead and type up any questions that you guys still have remaining in the queue, so Jay or I can manage those and answer those for you. So the one question, just so we get it verbally in the system, is in the recording, Jay mentioned there's a way to launch pre and post patch scripts in SCCM. I was not aware of this. Can you explain where this setting is located? As from Marty. And Jay put in a link to the docs location on it. But what Jay was referring to is just going to Configuration Manager, and on your collection, so go to a custom collection that you have created, like Windows 7 clients, and then go to properties of that collection, and then in this blank space here, you'll have the ability of turning that on. So let me go ahead and show you how easy it is to turn that on. Just go to site configuration, sites, and I don't think, let me verify I've got this. Yeah, there's a pre-release feature. So you have to consent to pre-release features. So you have to turn on this under site configuration, sites, hierarchy settings, and consent to use pre-release features. It's not a full production feature yet. It's pre-release yet. And then once you've done that, go to updates and servicing, go to features, and then you'll find, expand these out, server groups is what it's called. Go to server groups, you'll see it's pre-release and it's turned off. So just go ahead and turn it on. It pops up with a message saying, hey, yeah, you need to turn that on, and it'll happen once you restart the console. So I click yes, give that a moment to process that request. Then I go ahead and close the console, restart the Configuration Manager console, and then I go right back to that same collection I was on. I think it was Windows 7 clients or Windows 10 deployments, doesn't matter what collection, but I think I was on this one, just so you see the same thing. Now it should have, no, got there too soon. So let me go ahead and close the console again, and starting back up. It takes it a moment to process that request, assuming that I did turn it on, because I remember seeing the confirmation dialog. Sometimes my mind says I did something and I didn't really do it. And there we go. So now you get this section here in your collection properties. All devices are part of the same server group. So you just go ahead and select the checkbox, then click Settings. And then down here is what Jay was talking about, the node drain scripts and the node resume scripts. So you can create PowerShell scripts there to state, here's things I need to do before this system gets patched. That's the node drain script. And then here's things I need to do after the system does get patched. And part of this I can designate, and these don't require any clustering services. They're just Windows computers, Windows clients. I can designate by default 50% of my computers in this collection can be down at any one point in time for patching. Or I can say a specific number of computers that I want to have down at a time for patching. Or I can specify, let me go to a different collection so it's got more than one computer in it. Let me go to all servers. All servers. It's got 3 in it. It'll make it a little more simple to see if I say I can specify the order. So I want my domain controller to be patched first, and I want my primary site server to be patched last. So it'll patch DC first. Once it's done and it's finished the node resume script and back up, then it will move on to member, do the same thing. When it's done, it'll move on to primary. So that's that feature that he was talking about, unless you're implying something else that I'm not aware of, Jay.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yep, that's absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think this is where we were saying that hopefully something like this is also happening somewhere in a servicing node, right? So
yeah,
we could do the post and that, right? So that's what I was referring to, absolutely.
Yep. So getting more like this scenario or the task sequences where you can have the different actions at different points, so you can go ahead and get that. But yeah, it is a pre-release feature, so just be aware of that. So pre-release means that the configuration manager product group is confident enough in it that the quality is good enough so that you can go ahead and use it in production, but they don't want to make it a full non-pre-release feature so that you don't blow it out in your environment that has hundreds of thousands of clients because it doesn't have all the features there yet. So they do actually want to add a lot more capabilities to this, and they actually have over the different releases, but it's actually been pre-released since, I think, 1602. So it's been quite a while that it's been in there in pre-release mode, and they keep trying to enhance it, and they finally got into the ordering of systems in there. So cool. Anybody else with any questions for us? We're just past the top of the hour, so just a couple minutes past. So things are looking good from that aspect. Didn't run you too late today, as I certainly have a habit of doing. So while I'll wait another minute, see if anybody else has any questions coming in. For those of you that are still listening to us, thanks, appreciate that, and hopefully you found the session beneficial, worthwhile, so you heard some things about the Windows as a service that you might not have known, especially some of the new terminology that the Microsoft's changing to and going to the 18-month support cycle on things. So hopefully that's been beneficial for you. If you missed last week's session, which was on just what's new in current branch 1706, then you can go ahead and get the recording up on our Vimeo site, which this one, again, will get posted up there probably later on today, if not tomorrow. And then next week, and it's Wednesday next week, not our traditional Thursday, so Wednesday of next week, same time slot though, we'll be having the last session in this series, and it's on best practices for enterprise software deployments. So Jay, Phil, and I, or whoever of us is available then, we'll be here to go ahead and talk about that for you and get you some information there. So, okay, that's just another, Marty, I'm just left us with nothing else new there. Okay, looks like nothing else is happening as far as questions go. So thank you all for your time. Hopefully it was worthwhile, and you guys all have a great rest of the day. I'll stop the webinar, get the recording converted over, and then get it handed off to get uploaded to our site. So thanks again, Jay, appreciate it, and then thanks for providing your wisdom. And if you guys have any questions or anything for Netrix, you can get to them through Jay had his email on the front page there of our slide deck, or netrix.com, I assume.
Yep, jparekh@netrixllc.com.
Very good. So thanks all. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jay.